Chapter 37 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 37 Vengeance. During that meal, Bernal Diaz spoke of our first meeting on the causeway, and of how I had gone near to killing him in error, thinking that he was Sarcada, and then he asked me what was my quarrel with Sarcada. In as few words as possible I told him the story of my life, and of all the evil that de Garcia or Sarcada had worked upon me and mine, and of how it was through him that I was in this land that day. Oh, he listened amazed. "Holy Mother," he said at length, "I always knew him for a villain, but that, if you do not lie, friend Wingfield, he could be such a man as this, I do not know. Now, by my word, had I heard this tale an hour ago, Sarcada would not have left this camp till he had entered it or cleared himself by combat with you. But I fear it is too late. He was to leave for Mexico at the rising of the moon, to stir up mischief against me, because I granted you terms. Not that I fear him there, where his repute is small." "I do not lie indeed," I answered. "Much of this tale I can prove if need be, and I can tell you I would give half the life that is left to me to stand face to face in open fight with him again. Ever has he escaped me, and the score between us is long." Now as I spoke this, it seemed to me that a cold and dreadful air played upon my hands and brow, and a warning sense of present evil crept into my soul, overcoming me so that I could not stir or speak for a while. "Let us go and see if he is gone," said Diaz presently, and summoning a guard he was about to leave the chamber. It was at this moment that I chanced to look up and see a woman standing in the doorway. Her hand rested on the doorpost. Her head, from which the long hair streamed, was thrown back, and her face was a look of such anguish that at first, so much was she changed, I did not know her for Otomie. When I knew her, I knew all. One thing only could conjure up that terror and agony that shone in her deep eyes. "What has chanced to our son?" I asked. "Dead, dead," she answered in a whisper that seemed to pierce my marrow. I said nothing, for my heart told me what had happened, but Diaz asked, "Dead? Why, what has killed him?" "De Garcia, I saw him go," replied Otomie. Then she tossed her arms high, and without another sound fell backwards to the earth. In that moment I think that my heart broke. At least I know that nothing has had the power to move me greatly since, though this memory moves me day by day and hour by hour, till I die and go to seek my son. "Say, Bernal Diaz," I cried with a hoarse laugh, "did I lie to you concerning this comrade of yours?" Then springing over Otomie's body, I left the chamber, followed by Bernal Diaz and the others. Without the door I turned to the left towards the camp. I had not gone 100 paces when, in the moonlight, I saw a small troop of horsemen riding towards us. It was de Garcia and his servants, and they headed towards the mountain pass on the road to Mexico. I was not too late. "Halt!" cried Bernal Diaz. "Who commands me to halt?" said the voice of de Garcia. "I, your captain," roared Diaz. "Halt, you devil, you murderer, or you shall be cut down." I saw him turn pale. "These are strange manners, señor," he said. "Of your grace, I ask." At this moment de Garcia caught sight of me for the first time, for I had broken from the hold of Diaz, who clutched my arm and was moving towards him. I said nothing, but there was something in my face which told him that I knew all, and warned him of his doom. He looked past me, but the narrow road was blocked with men. I drew near, but he did not wait for me. Once he put his hand on the hilt of the sword, then suddenly he wheeled the horse round and fled down the street of Jaca. De Garcia fled, and I followed after him, running fast and low like a hound. At first he gained on me, but soon the road grew rough, and he could not gallop over it. We were clear of the town now, or rather of its ruins, and travelling along the little path which the Indians use to bring down snow from Jaca in the hot weather. Perhaps there are some 5 miles of this path before the snow line is reached, beyond which no Indian dared to set his foot, for the ground above was holy. Along this path he went, and I was content to see it, for I knew well that the traveller cannot leave it, since on either side lie watercourses and cliffs. Mile after mile de Garcia followed it, looking now to the left, now to the right, and now ahead, and the great dome of snow crowned with fire that towered above him. But he never looked behind him. He knew what was there, death in the shape of a man. I came on doggedly, saving all my strength. I was sure that I must catch him at last. It did not matter when. At length he reached the snow line where the path ended, and for the first time he looked back. There I was some 200 paces behind him. Aye, his death was behind him, and in front of him shone the snow. For a moment he hesitated, and I heard the heavy breathing of his horse in the great stillness. Then he turned and faced the slope, driving his spurs into the brute's side. The snow was hard, for here the frost bit sharply, and for a while, though it was so steep, the horse travelled over it better than he had done along the pathway. Now, as before, there was only one road he could take, for we passed up the crest of the ridge, a pleat as it were in the garment of the mountain, and on either side were steeps of snow on which neither horse nor man might keep his footing. For 2 hours or more we followed that ridge, and as we went through the silence of the haunted volcan and the loneliness of its eternal snows, it seemed to me that my spirit entered into the spirit of my quarry, and that with his eyes I saw all that was passing in his heart. To a man so wronged, the dream was pleasant even if it were not true, for I read there was such agony, such black despair, such haunting memories, such terror of advancing death, of what lay beyond it, that no revenge of man's could surpass their torment. And it was true. I knew that it was true. He suffered all this and more, for if he had no conscience, at least he had fear and imagination to quicken and multiply the fear. Now the snow grew steeper, and the horse was almost spent, for he could scarcely breathe at so great a height. In vain did de Garcia drive his spurs into its sides. The gallant beast could do no more. Suddenly it just fell down. Surely, I thought, he will await me now. But even if I had not fathomed the depths of his terrors, for de Garcia disengaged himself from the fallen horse, looked towards me, then fled forward on his feet, casting his armour as he went, as he might travel more lightly. By this time we had passed the snow and were come to the edge of the ice cap that is made by the melting of the snow with the heat of the inner fires, or by that of the sun in hot seasons, I know not, and its freezing in the winter months or in the cold of the nights. At least there is such a cap on Xaca, measuring nearly a mile in depth, which lies between the snow and the black rim of the crater. Up this ice climbed de Garcia, and the task is not the easiest, even for one of the untroubled mind, for a man must step from crack to crack or needle to needle of rough ice that stands upon the smooth surface like the bristles on a hog's back, and woe to him if one breaks or if he slips, for then, as he falls, very shortly the flesh will be filed from the bones by the thousand of sword-like points over which he must pass in his descent towards the snow. Indeed, many times I feared greatly lest this should chance to de Garcia, for I did not desire to lose my vengeance thus. Therefore twice, when I saw him in danger, I shouted to him, telling him where to put his feet, for now I was within 20 paces of him, and, strange to say, he obeyed me without question, forgetting everything in his terror of instant death. But for myself I had no fear, for I knew that I should not fall, though the place was one which I had surely shrunk from climbing at any other time. All this while we had been travelling towards Xaca's fiery crest by the bright moonlight, but now the dawn broke suddenly on the mountain top, and the flame died away in the heart of the pillar of smoke. It was wonderful to see the red glory that shone upon the ice cap, and on us two men who crept like flies across it, while the mountain's breast and the world below were plunged in the shadows of night. "Now we have a better light to climb by, comrade," I called to de Garcia, and my voice rang strangely among the ice cliffs, where never a man's voice had echoed before. As I spoke, the mountain rumbled and bellowed beneath us, shaking like the wind-tossed tree, as though in wrath at the desecration of its sacred solitudes. With the rumbling came a shower of grey ash that rained down upon us, and for a little while hid de Garcia from my sight. I heard him call out in fear, and was afraid lest he had fallen. But presently the ashes cleared away, and I saw him standing safely on the lava rim that surrounds the crater. Now, I thought, he will surely make a stand, for could he have found courage, it had been easy for him to kill me with his sword, which he still wore, as I climbed from the ice to the hot lava. It seemed that he thought of it, for he turned and glared at me like a devil, then went on again, leaving me wondering where he believed that he would find refuge. Some 300 paces from the edge of the ice, the smoke and steam of the crater rose into the air, and between the two was lava so hot that in places it was difficult to walk upon. Across this bed, that trembled as I passed over it, went de Garcia, somewhat slowly, for now he was weary, and I followed him at my ease, getting my breath again. Presently I saw that he had come to the edge of the crater, for he leaned forward and looked over, and I thought that he was about to destroy himself by plunging into it. But if such thoughts had been in his mind, he forgot them when he had seen what sort of nest this was to sleep in, for turning, he came back towards me, sword up, and we met within a dozen paces of the edge. I say met, but in truth we did not meet, for he stopped again, well out of reach of my sword. I sat down upon a block of lava and looked at him. It seemed to me that I could not feast my eyes enough upon his face. And what a face it was, that of a more than murderer about to meet his reward. Would that I could paint to show it, for no words can tell the fearfulness of those red and sunken eyes, those grinning teeth and quivering lips. I think that when the enemy of mankind has cast his last die and won his last soul, he too will look thus as he passes into doom. "At length, de Garcia," I said. "Why do you not kill me and make an end?" he asked hoarsely. "Where is the hurry, cousin? For hard on 20 years I have sought you. Shall we then part so soon? Let us talk a while. Before we part to meet no more, perhaps of your courtesy you will answer me a question, for I am curious. Why have you wrought these evils on me and mine? Surely you must have reason for what seems to be an empty and foolish wickedness." I spoke to him thus calmly and coldly, feeling no passion, feeling nothing, for in that strange hour I was no longer Thomas Wingfield. I was no longer human. I was a force, an instrument. I could think of my dead son without sorrow. He did not seem dead to me, for I partook of the nature that he had put on in this change of death. I could even think of de Garcia without hate, as though he also were nothing but a tool in some other hand. Moreover, I knew that he was mine, body and mind, and that he must answer and truly, so surely as he must die, when I chose to kill him. He tried to shut his lips, but they opened of themselves, and word by word the truth was dragged from his black heart, as though he stood already before the judgment seat. "I loved your mother, my cousin," he said, speaking slowly and painfully. "From a child I loved her only in the world, as I love her to this hour. But she hated me because I was wicked, and feared me because I was cruel. Then she saw your father and loved him, and brought about his escape from the Holy Office, whither I had delivered him to be tortured and burnt, and fled with him to England. I was jealous, and would have been revenged if I might, but there was no way. I led an evil life, and when nearly 20 years had gone by, chance took me to England on a trading journey. By chance I learned that your father and mother lived near Yarmouth, and I determined to see her, though at that time I had no thought of killing her. Fortune favoured me, and we met in the woodlands, and I saw that she was still beautiful, and I knew that I loved her more than ever before. I gave her a choice to fly with me or to die, and after a while she died. But as she shrank up the wooded hillside before my sword, of a sudden she stood still and said, 'Listen before me, Juan. I have a death vision. As I have fled from you, so shall you fly before one of my blood, in a place of fire and rock and snow. And as you drive me to the gates of heaven, so shall he drive you into the mouth of hell.' 'In such a place as this, cousin,' I said. 'In such a place as this,' he whispered, glancing round. 'Continue.' Again he strove to be silent, but again my will mastered him, and he spoke. It was too late to spare her if I wished to escape myself, so I killed her and fled. But terror entered my heart, terror which has never left it to this hour, for always before my eyes was the vision of him of your mother's blood, before whom I should fly as she fled before me, who shall drive me into the mouth of hell. Well, that must be yonder, cousin, I said, pointing with my sword towards the pit of the Creator. It is yonder. I have looked, but only for the body, cousin, not for the spirit. Only for the body, not for the spirit, he repeated after me. Continue, I said. Afterwards, on the same day, I met you, Thomas Wingfield. Already your dead mother's prophecy had taken hold of me, and seeing one of her blood, I strove to kill him, lest he should kill me, as he will do presently, cousin. As he will do presently, he repeated like a talking bird. You know what happened and how I escaped. I fled to Spain and strove to forget, but I could not. One night I saw a face in the streets of Seville that reminded me of your face. I did not think that it could be you, yet so strong was my fear that I determined to fly to the far Indies. You met me on the night of my flight, when I was bidding farewell to a lady, one Isabella de Siguenza, cousin. I bade farewell to her afterwards, and delivered her dying words to you. Now she waits to welcome you again, she and her child. Oh, he shuddered and went on. In the ocean we met again. You rose out of the sea. I did not dare to kill you at once. I thought that you must die in the slave-hold, and that none could bear witness against me and hold me guilty of your blood. You did not die. Even the sea could not destroy you. But I thought that you were dead. I came to Anahuac in the train of Cortes, and again we met. Oh, that time you nearly killed me. Afterwards I had my revenge, and I tortured you well. I meant to murder you on the morrow, though first I would torture you, for terror can be very cruel, but you escaped me. Long years passed. I wandered hither and thither, to Spain, back to Mexico, and elsewhere. But wherever I went, my fear, the ghosts of the dead, and my dreams went with me, and I was never fortunate. Only the other day I joined the company of Diaz as an adventurer. Not till we reached the City of Pines did I learn that you were the captain of the Otomy. It was said that you were long dead, and you know the rest. Why did you murder my son, cousin? Was he not of your mother's blood, of the blood that should bring my doom upon me? And did I owe you no reward for all the terror of these many years? Moreover, he is foolish who strives to slay the father and spares the son. He is dead, and I am glad that I killed him, though he haunts me now with the others, and shall haunt you eternally. Now let us make an end. You have your sword. Use it if you can. It will be easier to die fighting. I cannot, he groaned. My doom is upon me. As you will. And I came at him, sword up. He ran from before me, moving backwards and keeping his eyes fixed upon mine, as I have seen a rat do when a snake is about to swallow it. Now we were upon the edge of the crater, and looking over I saw an awful sight, for there, some 30 feet beneath us, a red-hot lava growing sullenly beneath a shifting pall of smoke, rolled and spouted like a thing alive. Jets of steam flew upwards from its screaming sound. Lines of noxious vapours, many-coloured, crept and twisted upon its surface, and a hot and horrid stench poisoned the heated air. Here indeed was such a gate as I could wish for de Garcia to pass through to his own abode. I looked, pointed with my sword, and laughed. He looked and shrieked aloud, for now all his manhood had left him, so great was his terror of what lay beyond the end. Yes, this proud and haughty Spaniard screamed and wept and prayed for mercy. He who had done so many villainies beyond forgiveness prayed for mercy that he might find time to repent. I stood and watched him, and so dreadful was his aspect that horror struck me even through the calm of my frozen heart. "Come, it is time to finish," I said, and again I lifted my sword, only to let it fall, for suddenly his brain gave way, and de Garcia went mad before my eyes. Of all that followed I will not write. With his madness courage came back to him, and he began to fight, but not with me. He began to perceive me no more, but nevertheless he fought, and desperately, thrusting at the air. It was terrible to see him thus doing battle with his invisible foes, and to hear his screams and curses, as inch by inch they drove him back to the edge of the crater. Here he stood a while, like one who makes a last stand against an overpowering strength, thrusting and striking furiously. Twice he nearly fell, as though beneath a mortal wound, but recovering himself, fought on with nothingness. Then, with a sharp cry, suddenly he threw his arms wide, as a man does who is pierced through the heart. His sword dropped from his hand, and he fell backwards into the pit. I turned my eyes away, for I wished to see no more. But often I have wondered who or what it was that dealt de Garcia his death wound. End of chapter 37. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 38 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 38. Otome's Farewell. Thus then did I accomplish the vengeance that I had sworn to my father I would wreak upon de Garcia, or rather, thus did I witness its accomplishment. For in the end he died, terribly enough, not by my hand, but by those of his own fears. Oh, since then I have sorrowed for this, for when the frozen and unnatural calm passed my mind, I hated him as bitterly as ever, and grieved that I should let him die otherwise than by my hand. And to this hour such is my mind towards him. Doubtless many may think it wicked, since we were taught to forgive our enemies, but here I leave the forgiveness to God, for how can I pardon one who betrayed my father to the priests, who murdered my mother and my son, who chained me up in a slave ship and for many hours tortured me with his own hand? Rather, year by year do I hate him more. I write of this at some length, since the matter has been a trouble to me. I never could say that I was in charity with all men living and dead, and because of this, some years since, a worthy and learned rector of this parish took upon himself to refuse me the rights of the church. Then I went to the bishop and laid the story before him, and it puzzled him somewhat. But he was a man of large mind, and in the end he rebuked the rector and commanded him to minister to me, for he thought with me that the Almighty could not ask of an erring man that he should forgive one who had wrought such evils on him and his, even though that enemy were dead and gone to judgment in another place. But enough of this question of conscience. When de Garcia had gone into the pit, I turned my steps homewards, or rather to the ruined city which I could see beneath me, for I had no home left. Now I must descend the ice cap, and this was found less easy than climbing it had been, for my vengeance being accomplished, I became as other men are, and a sad and weary one at that. So sad indeed that I should not have sorrowed greatly if I had made a false step upon the ice. But I made none, and at length I came to the snow where the travelling was easy. My oath was fulfilled and my vengeance was accomplished, but as I went I reckoned up the cost. I had lost my betrothed, the love of my youth. For 20 years I had lived a savage chief among savages and made acquaintance with every hardship, wedded to a woman, although she loved me dearly and did not lack nobility of mind, as she had shown the other day, was still at heart a savage, or at least a thrall of demon gods. The tribe that I ruled was conquered. The beautiful city where I dwelt was a ruin. I was homeless and a beggar, and my fortune would be great if in the issue I escaped death or slavery. All this I could have borne, for I had borne the like before, but the cruel end of my last surviving son, the one true joy of my desolate life, I could not bear. The love of those children had become the passion of my middle age, and as I loved them, so they had loved me. I had trained them from babyhood till their hearts were English and not Aztec, as were their speech and faith, and thus they were not only my dear children, but companions of my own race, the only ones I had. And now, by accident, by sickness, and by sword, they were dead, the three of them, and I was desolate. We think much of the sorrows of our youth, and should a sweetheart give us the go-by, we fill the world with moans and swear that it holds no comfort for us. But when we bend our heads before the shrouded shape of some lost child, then it is for that first time we learn how terrible grief can be. Time, they tell us, will bring us consolation, but it is false. For such sorrows time has no salves. I say who am old, as they are so they shall be. There is no hope but faith, there is no comfort save in the truth that love, which might have withered on the earth, grows fastest in the tomb, to flower gloriously in heaven. That no love indeed can be perfect till God sanctifies and completes it with his seal of death. I threw myself down there upon the desolate snows of Xaca, that none had trod before, and wept such tears as a man may weep but once in his life days. O my son Absalom, my son Absalom! Would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son! I cried with the ancient king, I whose grief was greater than his, for had I not lost 3 sons within as many years? Then remembering that as this king had gone to join his son long centuries ago, so I must one day go to join mine, and taking such comfort from the thought as may be found in it, I rose and crept back to the ruined city of pines. It was near sunset when I came thither, for the road was long, and I grew weak. By the palace I met the Captain Diaz and some of his company, and they lifted their bonnets to me as I went by, for they had respect for my sorrows. Only Diaz spoke, saying, "Is the murderer dead?" I nodded and went on. I went on to our chamber, for there I thought that I should find Otomie. She sat in it alone, cold and beautiful, as though she had been fashioned in marble. "I have buried him with the bones of his brethren and his forefathers," she said, answering the question that my eyes asked. "It seemed best that you should see him no more, lest your heart should break." "It is well," I answered, "but my heart is broken already." "Is the murderer dead?" she said presently, in the very words of Diaz. "Oh, he is dead." "How?" I told her in a few words. "You should have slain him yourself. Our son's blood is not avenged." "I should have slain him, but in that hour I did not seek vengeance. I watched it fall from heaven, and was content. Perchance it is best so. The seeking of vengeance had brought on all my sorrows upon me. Vengeance belongs to God, not to man, as I have learned too late." "I do not think so," said Otomie, and the look upon her face was that look which I had seen when she smoked the Tlascalan, when she taunted Maria, and when she danced upon the pyramid, the leader of the sacrifice. "Had I been in your place I would have killed him by inches. When I had done with him, then the devils might begin, but not before. But it is of no account. Everything is done with. All are dead, and my heart with them. Now eat, for you are weary." So I ate, and afterwards I cast myself upon the bed and slept. In the darkness I heard the voice of Otomie that said, "Awake, I would speak with you," and there was that about her voice which stirred me from my heavy sleep. "Speak on," I said. "Where are you, Otomie?" "Seated at your side. I cannot rest, so I am seated here. Now listen. Many, many years ago we met, when you were brought to Guatemoc from Tabasco. Oh, well do I remember the first sight of you, the Teule in the court of my father Montezuma at Chapultepec. I loved you then as I have loved you ever since. At least I have never gone astray after strange gods," and she laughed bitterly. "Why do you talk of these things, Otomy?" I asked.
"Because it is my fancy to do so. Cannot you spare me 1 hour from your sleep, who have spared you so many? You remember how you scorned me. Oh, I thought I should have died of shame when, after I had caused myself to be given to you as wife, the wife of Tezcat, you told me of the maid across the seas, that lily maid whose token is still set upon your finger. But I lived through it, and I loved you the better for your honesty. And then you know the rest. I won you because I was brave and lay at your side upon the stone of sacrifice, where you kissed me and told me that you loved me. But you never loved me, not truly. All the while you were thinking of the lily maid. I knew it then as I know it now, though I tried to deceive myself. I was beautiful in those days, and this is something with a man. I was faithful, and that is more, and once or twice you thought that you loved me. Now I wish that those Teules had come an hour later, and we had died together upon the stone. That is, I wish it for my own sake, not yours. Then we escaped, and the great struggle came. I told you then that I understood it all. You had kissed me on the stone of sacrifice, but in that moment you were as one dead. When you came back to life, it was otherwise. But fortune took the game out of your hands, and you married me, and swore an oath to me, and this oath you have kept faithfully. You married me, but you did not know whom you married. You thought me beautiful, and sweet and true, and all these things I was, but you did not understand that I was far apart from you, that I was still a savage, as my forefathers had been. You thought that I had learned your ways. Perchance even you thought that I reverenced your God, as for your sake I have striven to do. But all the while I have followed the ways of my own people, and I could not quite forget my own gods, or at the least they would not suffer me, their servant, to escape them. For years and years I put them from me, but at least they were avenged, and my heart mastered me, or rather they mastered me. For I knew nothing of what I did some few nights since, when I celebrated the sacrifice of Huitzel, and you saw me at the ancient rites. All these years you have been true to me, and I had borne you children whom you loved. But you loved them for their own sake, not for mine. Indeed, at heart you hated the Indian blood that was mixed in their veins with yours. Me also loved in a certain fashion, and this half-love of yours drove me well nigh mad. Such as it was, it died when you saw me distraught and celebrating the rites of my forefathers on the teocalli yonder, and you knew me for what I am, a savage. And now the children who linked us together are dead. One by one they died in this way and that, for the curse which follows my blood descended upon them, and your love for me is dead with them. I alone remained alive, a monument of past days, and I die also. Nay, nay, be silent, listen to me, for my time is short. When you bade me call you husband no longer, then I knew it was finished. I obey you. I put you from me. You are no more my husband, and soon I shall cease to be your wife. Still, Teule, I pray you listen to me. Now it seems to you in your sorrow that your days are done, and there is no happiness left for you. This is not so. You are still but a man in the beginning of middle age, and you are yet strong. You will escape from this ruined land, and when you shake the dust of it off your feet, its curse shall fall from you. You will return to your own place, and there you will find who awaited your coming for many years. There the savage woman whom you mated with, the princess of a fallen house, will become but a fantastic memory to you, and all these strange, eventful years will be as a midnight dream. Only your love for the dead children will always remain. These you must always love by day and by night, and the desire of them, that desire for the dead, than which there is nothing more terrible, shall follow you to your grave. And I am glad that it should be so, for I was their mother, and some thought of me must go with them. This alone the lily maid has left to me, and there only I shall prevail against her. For Teule, no child of hers shall live to rob your heart of the memory of those I gave you. Oh, I have watched you day by day and by night. I have seen the longing in your eyes for a face which you have lost, and for a land of your youth. Be happy. You shall gain both, for the struggle is ended, and the lily maid has been too strong for me. I grew weak, and I have little more to say. We part, and perhaps for ever. For what is there between us save the souls of those dead sons of ours? Since you desire me no more, that I may make our severance perfect. Now, in the hour of my death, I renounce your gods, and I seek my own. Though I think that I love yours and hate those of my people. Is there any communion between them? We part, and perchance for ever. Yet I pray of you to think of me kindly, for I have loved you, and I love you. I was the mother of your children, whom, being Christian, you will meet again. I love you now and for always. I am glad you have lived, because you kissed me on the stone of sacrifice, and afterwards I bore your sons. They are ours, and not mine. It seems to me now that I only cared for them because they were yours, and they loved you, and not me. Take them. Take their spirits as you have taken everything. You swore that death alone should sever us, and you have kept your oath to the letter and in the thought. But now I go to the houses of the sun to seek my own people, and to you, Teule, with whom I have lived many years and seen much sorrow, but whom I will no longer call husband, since you forbade me so to do. I say, make no mock of me to the lily maid. Speak of her as little as you may. Be happy and farewell." Now as she spoke ever more faintly, and I listened bewildered, the light of dawn grew slowly in the chamber. It gathered on the white shape of Otomie, seated in a chair hard by the bed, and I saw that her arms hung down and that her head was resting on the back of the chair. Now I sprang up and peered into her face. It was white and cold, and I could feel no breath upon her lips. I seized her hand, that also was cold. I spoke into her ear, I kissed her brow, but she did not move nor answer. The light grew quickly, and now I saw all. Otomie was dead by her own act. This was the manner of her death. She had drunk a poison of which the Indians have the secret, a poison that works slowly and without pain, leaving the mind unclouded to the end. It was while her life was fading from her that she had spoken to me thus sadly and bitterly. I sat upon the bed and gazed at her. I did not weep, for my tears were done, and as I have said, whatever I might feel, nothing could break my calm any more. And as I gazed, a great tenderness and sorrow took hold of me, and I loved Otomie better now that she was dead before me than ever I had done in her days of life, and this is saying much. I remembered her in the glory of her youth as she was in the court of her royal father. I remembered the look which she had given me when she stepped to my side upon the stone of sacrifice, and that other look when she defied Cuitlahua, the emperor, who would have slain me. Once more I seemed to hear the cry of bitter sorrow as she uncovered the body of the dead babe, our firstborn, and to see her, sword in hand, standing over the Tlascalan. Oh, many things came back to me in that sad hour of dawn, while I watched by the corpse of Otomie. There was truth in her words. I had never forgotten my first love, and often I desired to see her face. But it was not true to say that I had no love for Otomie. I loved her well, and I was faithful in my oath to her. Indeed, not until she was dead did I know how dear she had grown to me. It is true that there was a great gulf between us which widened with the years, the gulf of blood and faith, for I knew well that she could not altogether put away her old beliefs. And it is true that when I saw her leading the death chant, a great horror took me, and for a while I loathed her. But these things I might have lived to forgive, for they were part of her blood and nature. Moreover, the last and worst of them was not done by her own will. And when they were set aside, there remained much that I could honour and love in the memory of this most royal and beautiful woman, who for so many years was my faithful wife. So I thought in that hour, and so I think to this day. She said that we parted for ever, but I trust and I believe that this is not so. Surely there is forgiveness for us all, and a place where those who were near and dear to each other on the earth may once more renew their fellowship. At last I rose with a sigh to seek help, and as I rose I felt there was something about my neck, It was the collar of great emeralds which Guatemoc had given me, and that I had given to Otomie. She had set it there while I slept, and with it a lock of her long hair. Both shall be buried with me. I laid her in the ancient sepulchre, amid the bones of her forefathers, and by the bodies of her children. And 2 days later I rode to Mexico in the train of Bernal Diaz. At the mouth of the pass I turned and looked back upon the ruins of the City of Pines, where I had lived so many years, and where all I loved were buried. Long and earnestly I gazed. As in his hour of death a man looks back upon his past life, till at length Diaz laid his hand upon my shoulder. "You are a lonely man now, comrade," he said. "What plans have you for the future?" "None," I answered, "except to die." "Oh, never talk so," he said. "Why, you are scarcely 40, and I, who am 50 and more, do not speak of dying. Listen, you have friends in your own country, England?" I had. "Folk live long in those quiet lands. Go seek them. I will find you a passage to Spain." "I will think of it," I answered. In time we came to Mexico, a new and strange city to me, for Cortes had rebuilt it, and where the teocalli had stood, up which I was led to sacrifice, a cathedral was building, whereof the foundations were fitly laid with the hideous idols of the Aztecs. The place was well enough, but it is not so beautiful as the Tenochtitlan of Montezuma, nor ever will be. The people too were changed. Then they were warriors and free. Now they are slaves. In Mexico Diaz found me a lodging. None molested me there, for the pardon that I had received was respected. Also I was a ruined man, no longer to be feared. The part that I had played in the Noche Triste and in the defence of the city was forgotten, and the tale of my sorrows won me pity even from the Spaniards. I abode in Mexico 10 days, wandering sadly about the city and up to the hill of Chapultepec, where Montezuma's pleasure house had been, and where I had met Otomie. Nothing was left of its glories except some of the ancient cedar trees. On the 8th day of my stay an Indian stopped me in the street, saying that an old friend had charged him to say that she wished to see me. I followed the Indian, wondering who the friend might be, for I had no friends, and he led me to a fine stone house in a new street. Here I was seated in a darkened chamber and waited there a while, till suddenly a sad and sweet voice that seemed familiar to me addressed me in the Aztec tongue, saying, "Welcome, Teule." I looked, and there before me, dressed in a Spanish fashion, stood a lady, an Indian, still beautiful, but very feeble and much worn, as though with sickness and sorrow. "Do you not know Marina, Teule?" she said again, but before the words had left her lips I knew her. "Well, I will say this, that I should scarcely have known you, Teule. Trouble and time have done their work with both of us." I took her hand and kissed it. "Where then is Cortes?" I asked. Now a great trembling seized her. "Cortes is in Spain, pleading his suit. He has wed a new wife there, Teule. Many years ago he put me away, giving me in marriage to Don Juan Jaramillo, who took me because of my possessions. For Cortes dealt liberally with me, his discarded mistress." And she began to weep. Then by degrees I learned the story, but I will not write it here, for it is known to the world. When Marina had served his turn, and her wit was of no more service to him, the conqueror discarded her, leaving her to wither of a broken heart. She told me all the tale of her anguish when she learned the truth, and of how she had cried to him that henceforth he would never prosper, nor indeed did he ever do so. For 2 hours or more we talked, and when I had heard her story I told her mine, and she wept for me, since with all her faults Marina's heart was ever gentle. Then we parted never to meet again. Before I went she pressed a gift of money on me, and I was not ashamed to take it, who had none. This then was the story of Marina, who betrayed her country for her love's sake, and this the reward of her treason and her love. But I shall always hold her memory sacred, for she was a good friend to me, and twice she saved my life, nor would she desert me, even when Otomie taunted her so cruelly. End of chapter 38. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 39 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 39. Thomas comes back from the dead. Now on the morrow of my visit to Marina, the Captain Diaz came to see me, and told me that a friend of his was in command of a carrack which was due to sail from the port of Vera Cruz for Cadiz within 10 days, and that this friend was willing to give me a passage if I wished to leave Mexico. I thought for a while, and said that I would go, and that very night, having bid farewell to the Captain Diaz, whom may God prosper, for he was a good man among many bad ones, I set out from the city for the last time in the company of some merchants. A week's journey took us safely down the mountains to Vera Cruz, a hot, unhealthy town with an indifferent anchorage, much exposed to the fierce northerly winds. Here I presented my letters of recommendation to the commander of the carrack, who gave me passage without question, I laying in a stock of food for the journey. 3 nights later we set sail with a fair wind, and on the following morning at daybreak all that was left in sight of the land of Anahuac was the snowy crest of the volcan Orizaba. Presently that vanished into the clouds, and thus did I bid farewell to the far country where so many things had happened to me, and which according to my reckoning I had first sighted this very day 18 years before. Of my journey to Spain I have nothing of note to tell. It was more prosperous than such voyages often are, and within 10 weeks of the date of our lifting anchor at Vera Cruz, we let it drop in the harbour of Cadiz. Here I sojourned for 2 days, and as it chanced, there was an English ship in the harbour trading to London, and in her I took a passage, though I was obliged to sell the smallest of the emeralds from the necklace to find the means to do so. The money that Marina gave me
being spent. This emerald sold for a great sum, however, with part of which I purchased clothing suitable for a person of rank, taking the rest of the gold with me. I grieved to part with the stone indeed, though it was but a pendant to the pendant of the collar, but necessity knows no law. The pendant stone itself, a fine gem though flawed, I gave in after years to her gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth. On board the English ship they thought me a Spanish adventurer who had made moneys in the Indies, and I did not undeceive them, since I would be left to my own company for a while, that I might prepare my mind to return to ways of thought and life that it had long forgotten. Therefore I sat apart like some proud don, saying little, but listening much, and learning all I could of what had chanced in England since I left it some 20 years before. At length our voyage came to an end, and on the certain 12th of June I found myself in the mighty city of London that I had never yet visited, and kneeling down in the chamber of my inn, I thanked God that after enduring so many dangers and hardships, it had pleased him to preserve me to set foot again on English soil. Indeed, to this hour I count it nothing short of marvellous that this frail body of a man should survive all the sorrows and risks of death by sickness, hunger, battle, murder, drowning, wild beasts, and the cruelty of men, to which mine had been exposed for many years. In London I bought a good horse through the kind offices of the host of my inn, and on the morrow at daybreak I set out upon the Ipswich road. That very morning my last adventure befell me, for as I jogged along, musing of the beauty of the English landscape and drinking in the sweet air of June, a cowardly thief fired a pistol at me from behind a hedge, purposing to plunder me if I fell. The bullet passed through my hat, grazing the skull, but before I could do anything the rascal fled, seeing that he had missed his mark, and I went on with my journey, thinking to myself that it would indeed have been strange if after passing such great dangers in safety I had died at last by the hand of a miserable footpad within 5 miles of London town. I rode hard all that day and the next, and my horse being stout and swift, by 7:30 of the evening I pulled up upon the little hill whence I had looked my last on Bungay, when I rode thence for Yarmouth with my father. Below me lay the red roofs of the town. There to the right were the oaks of Ditchingham, and the beautiful tower of St. Mary's Church. Yonder the stream of Waveney wandered, and before me stretched the meadow lands, purple and golden with marsh weeds in bloom. All was as it had been. I could see no change at all. The only change was in myself. I dismounted, and going to a pool of water near the roadway, I looked at the reflection of my own face. I was changed indeed. Scarcely should I have known it for that of a lad who had ridden up this hill some 20 years ago. Now, alas, the eyes were sunken and very sorrowful, the features were sharp, and there was more grey than black in the beard and hair. I should scarcely have known it myself. Would any others know it, I wondered? Would there be any to know it indeed? In 20 years many die and others pass out of sight. Should I find a friend at all among the living? Since I read the letters which Captain Bell of the Adventurous had brought me before I sailed for Hispaniola, I had heard no tidings from my home, and what tidings awaited me now? Above all, what of Lily? Was she dead or married or gone? Mounting my horse, I pushed on again at a canter, taking the road past Waingford Mills, through the forts of Pernhow town, leaving Bungay upon my left. In 10 minutes I was at the gate of the bridle path that runs from the Norwich road for half a mile or more, beneath the steep and wooded bank under the shelter of which stands the lodge at Ditchingham. By the gate a man loitered in the last rays of the sun. I looked at him and knew him. It was Billy Minns, that same fool who had loosed de Garcia when I left him bound that I might run to meet my sweetheart. He was an old man now, and his white hair hung about his withered face. Moreover, he was unclean and dressed in rags, but I could have fallen on his neck and embraced him. So rejoiced was I to look once more on one whom I had known in youth. Seeing me come, he hobbled on his stick to the gate to open it for me, whining a prayer for alms. "Does Mr. Wingfield live here?" I said, pointing up the path, and my breath came quick as I asked. "Mr. Wingfield, sir, Mr. Wingfield. Which of them?" he answered. "The old gentleman, he's been dead nigh upon 20 years. I helped to dig his grave in the chancel of yonder church, I did. We laid him by his wife, her that was murdered. Then there's Mr. Geoffrey." "What of him?" I asked. "He's dead too, 12 years gone or more. He drank hisself to death, he did. And Mr. Thomas, he's dead, drowned overseas, they say, many a winter back. They're all dead, all dead. Ah, he was a rare one, Mr. Thomas was. I mind me well how I let that furriner go." And he rambled off into the tale of how he had set de Garcia on his horse after I had beaten him, nor could I bring him back from it. Casting a piece of money, I set spurs to my weary horse and cantered up the bridle path, leaving the mill house on my left, and as I went the beat of his hoofs seemed to echo the old man's words, "All dead, all dead." Doubtless Lily was dead also, or if she was not dead, when the tidings came that I had been drowned at sea, she would have married. Being so fair and sweet, she would surely not have lacked for suitors, nor could it be believed that she had worn her life away mourning over the lost love of her youth. Now the lodge was before me. It had changed no whit, except that the ivies and creepers on its front had grown higher, to the roof indeed, and I could see the people lived in the house, for it was well kept, and smoke hung above the chimneys. The gate was locked, and there was no serving men about, for night fell fast, and all had ceased from their labour. Leaving the house on the right, I passed round it to the stables that are at the back near the hillside garden, but here the gate was also locked, and I dismounted not knowing what to do. Indeed, I was so unmanned with fear and doubt that for a while I seemed bewildered, and leaving the horse to crop the grass where he stood, I wandered to the foot of the church path and gazed up the hill as though I waited for the coming of one whom I should meet. What if they were all dead? What if she were dead and gone? Oh, I buried my face in my hands and prayed to the Almighty, who had protected me through so many years, to spare me this last bitterness. I was crushed with sorrow, and I felt that I could bear no more. If Lily were lost to me also,
Then I thought that it would be best that I should die, since there was nothing left for which I cared to live. Thus I prayed for some while, trembling like a leaf, and when I looked up again, ere I turned to seek tidings from those that dwelt in the house, whoever they might be, the twilight had fallen completely, and lo! nightingales sang both far and near. I listened to their song, and as I listened, some troubled memory came back to me that at first I could not grasp. Then suddenly there rose up in my mind a vision of the splendid chamber of Montezuma's palace at Tenochtitlan, and of myself sleeping on a golden bed and dreaming on that bed. I knew it now. I was the god Tezcat, and on the morrow I must be sacrificed. And I slept in misery, and as I slept I dreamed. I dreamed that I stood where I stood this night, that the scent of the English flowers was in my nostrils, as it was this night, and that the sweet song of the nightingales rang in my ears as at this present hour. I dreamed that as I mused and listened, the moon came up over the green ash and oaks, and lo! there she shone. I dreamed that I heard the sound of singing on the hill. But now I awoke from this vision of the past and a long-lost dream, for as I stood, the sweet voice of a woman began to sing yonder on the brow of the slope. I was not mad. I heard it clearly, and the sound grew ever nearer as the singer drew down the steep hillside. It was so near now that I could catch the very words of the sad song which to this day I remember. Now I could see the woman's shape in the moonlight. It was tall and stately, and clad in a white robe. Presently she lifted her head to watch the flitter of a bat, and the moonlight lit upon her face. It was the face of Lily Bozard, my lost love, beautiful as of yore, though grown older and stamped with the seal of some great sorrow. I saw, and so deeply was I stirred at the sight, that had it not been for the low paling to which I clung, I must have fallen to the earth, and a deep groan broke from my lips. She heard the groan and ceased her song. Then catching sight of the figure of a man, she stopped and turned as though to fly. I stood quite still, and wonder overcoming her fear, she drew nearer and spoke in the sweet soft low voice that I remembered well, saying, "Who wanders here so late? Is it you, John?" Now when I heard her speak thus, a new fear took me. Doubtless she was married, and John was her husband. I had found her but to lose her more completely. Of a sudden it came into my mind that I would not discover myself till I knew the truth. I advanced at a pace, but not so far as to pass from the shadows of the shrubs which grew here, and taking my stand in such a fashion that the moonlight did not strike upon my face, I bowed low in a courtly Spanish fashion, and disguising my voice, spoke as a Spaniard might in broken English, which I was spared to write down. "Madam," I said, "have I the honour to speak to one who in bygone years was named Señora Lily Bozard?" "That was my name," she answered. "What is your errand with me, sir?" Now I trembled afresh, but spoke on boldly. "Before I answer, madam, forgive me for if I ask another question. Is this still your name?" "It is still my name. I am no married woman," she answered,
and for a moment the sky seemed to reel above me and the ground to heave beneath my feet like the lava crust of Jaca. But as yet I did not reveal myself, for I wished to learn if she still loved my memory. "Señora," I said, "I am a Spaniard who has served in the Indian wars of Cortes, of which perhaps you have heard." She bowed her head, and I went on. "In those wars I met a man who was named Teule, but who had another name in former days, so he told me on his deathbed some 2 years ago." "What name?" she asked in a low voice. "It was Thomas Wingfield." Now Lily moaned aloud, and in her turn caught at the pails to save herself from falling. "I deemed him dead those 18 years," she gasped, "drowned in the Indian seas where his vessel foundered." "I have heard that he was shipwrecked in those seas, señora, but he escaped death and fell among the Indians, who made a god of him and gave him the daughter of their king in marriage." And I paused. She shivered, then said in a hard voice, "Continue, sir. I listen to you." "My friend Teule took the part of the Indians in the wars, as being the husband of one of their princesses he must do in honour, and fought bravely for them for many years. At length the town that he defended was captured. His one remaining child was murdered. His wife, the princess, slew herself for sorrow, and he himself was taken into captivity, where he languished and died." "A sad tale, sir," she said with a little laugh, a mournful laugh that was half choked by tears. "A very sad tale, señora, but one which is not finished. While he lay dying, my friend told me that in his early life he had plighted troth with a certain English maid, named—" "I know the name. Continue." "He told me that though he had been wedded and loved his wife the princess, who was a very royal woman, that many times had risked her life for his, ay, even to lying at his side upon the stone of sacrifice, and of her own free will. Yet the memory of this woman to whom he once betrothed had companioned him through life and was strong upon him now at its close. Therefore he prayed me, for our friendship's sake, to seek her out when I returned to Europe, should she still live, and to give her a message from him, and to make a prayer to her on his behalf." "What message? What prayer?" Lily whispered. "This, that he loved her at the end of his life as he had loved her at the beginning, that he humbly prayed her forgiveness because he had broken the troth that they two swore beneath the tree at Ditchingham." "Sir," she cried, "what do you know of that?" "Only what my friend told me, señora." "Your friendship must have been close, and your memory must be good," she murmured. "Which he had done," I went on, "under strange circumstances, so strange indeed that he dared to hope that his broken troth might be renewed in some better world than this. His last prayer was that she should say to me, his messenger, that she forgave him and still loved him, as to his death he loved her." "And how can such forgiveness or such an avowal advantage a dead man?" Lily asked, watching me keenly through the shadows. "Have the dead eyes to see and ears to hear?" "How can I know, señora? I do but execute my mission."
And how can I know that you are a true stranger? It chanced that I had some tidings of the drowning of Thomas Wingfield many years ago, and this tale of Indians and princesses is wondrous strange, more like those that happen in romances than in this plain world. Have you no token of your good faith, sir?
Oh, I have such a token, señora, but the light is too faint for you to see it.
Then follow me to the house. There we will get light. Now stay." And once more, going to the stable gate, she called John. An old man answered her, and I knew the voice for that of one of my father's serving men. To him she spoke in low tones, then led the way by the garden path to the front door of the house, which she opened with a key from her girdle, motioning me to pass in before her. I did so, and thinking little of such matters at the moment, turned by habit into the doorway of the sitting-room which I knew so well, lifting my feet to avoid stumbling on its step, and passing into the room, found my way through the gloom to the wide fireplace where I took my stand. Lily watched me enter, then following me, she lit a taper at the fire which smouldered on the hearth, and placed it upon the table in the window in such fashion that though I was now obliged to take off my hat, my face was still in shadow. "Now, sir, your token if it pleases you." Then I drew the posy ring from my finger and gave it to her, and she sat down by the table and examined it in the light of the candle. And as she sat thus, I saw how beautiful she was still, and how little time had touched her, except for the sadness of her face, though now she had seen 38 winters. I saw also that though she kept control of her features as she looked upon the ring, her breast heaved quickly and her hand shook. "The token is a true one," she said at length. "I know the ring, though it is somewhat worn since last I saw it. It was my mother's, and many years ago I gave it as a love-gage to a youth to whom I promised myself in marriage. Doubtless all your tale is true also, sir, and I thank you for your courtesy in bringing it so far. It is a sad tale, a very sad tale. And now, sir, as I may not ask you to stay in this house where I live alone, and there is no inn near by, I propose to send serving men to conduct you to my brother's dwelling, that is something more than a mile away. If indeed," she added slowly, "you do not already know the path. There you will find entertainment, and there the sister of your dead companion, Mary Bozard, will be glad to learn the story of his strange adventures from your lips." I bowed my head and answered, "First, señora, I would pray your answer to my friend's dying prayer and message. It is childish to send answers to the dead. Still, I pray for them as I was charged to do. How reads the writing within the ring, sir?" "Heart to heart, though far apart," I said glibly, and next instant I could have bitten out my tongue. "Ah, you know that also, but doubtless you have carried the ring for many months and learned the writing. Well, sir, though we are far apart, and though perchance I cherish the memory of him who wore this ring, and for his sake remained unwed, it seemed that his heart went a-straying, to the breast indeed of some savage woman whom he married, and who bore him children. That being so, my answer to the prayer of your dead friend is that I forgive him indeed, but I must needs take back the vows which I swore to him for this life and for ever, since he has broken them, and as best I may strive to cast out the love I bore him since he rejected and dishonoured it." And standing up, Lily made as though she tore at her breast and threw something from her, and at the same time she let fall the ring upon the floor. I heard, and my heart stood still. So this was the end of it. Well, she had the right of me, though now I began to wish that I had been less honest, for sometimes women can forgive a lie sooner than such frankness. I said nothing. My tongue was tied, but a great misery and weariness entered me. Stooping down, I found the ring, and replacing it on my finger, I turned to seek the door with a last glance at the woman who refused me. Halfway thither I paused for 1 second, wondering if I should do well to declare myself, then bethought me that if she would not abate her anger towards me dead, her pity for me living would be small. Nay, I was dead to her, and dead I would remain. Now I was at the door, and my foot was on its step, when suddenly a voice, Lily's voice, sounded in my ears, and it was sweet and kind. "Thomas," said the voice, "Thomas, before you go, will you take count of the gold and goods and land that you placed in my keeping?" Now I turned amazed, and lo! Lily came towards me slowly with her outstretched arms. "O foolish man," she whispered low, "did you think to deceive a woman's heart thus clumsily? You who talked of the beech in the hall garden, you who found your way so well to this dark chamber, and spoke the writing of the ring with the very voice of one who had been dead so long? Listen. I forgive that friend of yours his broken troth, for he was honest in the telling of his fault, and it is hard for a man to live alone so many years, and in strange companies come strange adventures. Moreover, I will still say it, I still love him as it seems that he loves me, though in truth I grow somewhat old for love, who have lingered long waiting to find it beyond my grave." Thus Lily spoke, sobbing as she spoke. Then my arms closed round her, and she said no more. And yet, as our lips met, I thought of Otomie, remembering her words, and remembering also that she had died by her own hand on this very day a year ago. Let us pray that the dead have no vision of the living. End of chapter 39. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 40 of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Patrick 79. Chapter 40. Amen. And now there is little left for me to tell, and my tale draws to its end, for which I am thankful, for I am very old, and writing is a weariness to me. So great a weariness indeed that many a time during the past winter I have been near to abandoning the task. For a while Lily and I sat almost silent in this same room where I write today, for our great joy and many another emotion that was mixed with it clogged our tongues. Then, as though moved by one impulse, we knelt down and offered our humble thanks to heaven that had preserved us both to this strange meeting.
Scarcely had we risen from our knees when there was a stir without the house, and presently a buxom dame entered, followed by a gallant gentleman, a lad, and a maiden. These were my sister Mary, her husband Wilfred Bozard, Lily's brother, and their two surviving children, Roger and Joan. When she guessed that it was I come home again and no other, Lily had sent them tidings by the servant man John, that one was with her whom she believed they would be glad to see, and they had hurried hither, not knowing whom they should find. Nor were they much wiser at first, for I was much changed, and the light in the room shone dim, but stood perplexed, wondering who this stranger might be. "Mary," I said at length, "Mary, do you not remember me?" "My sister!" Then she cried aloud, and throwing herself into my arms, she wept there a while, as would any of us were our beloved dead suddenly to appear before our eyes, alive and well. And her husband clasped me by the hand and swore heartily in his amazement, as is the fashion of some men when they are moved. But the children stood staring blankly till I called the girl to me, who now was much what her mother had been when we parted, and kissing her told her that I was that uncle of whom perhaps she had heard as dead many years ago. Then my horse, that all this while had been forgotten, having been caught and stabled, we went to supper, and it was a strange meal to me, and after meat I asked for tidings. Now I learned that the fortune which my old master Fonseca had left to me came home in safety, and that it had prospered exceedingly under Lily's care, for she had spent but very little of it for her maintenance, looking on it always as a trust rather than her own. When my death seemed certain, my sister Mary had entered on her share of possessions, however, and with it had purchased some outlying lands in Earsham and Hedenham, and the wood and the manor of Tyndale Hall in Ditchingham and Broome. These lands I made haste to say she might keep as a gift from me, since it seemed that I had greater riches than I could need without them, and this saying of mine pleased her husband Wilfred Bozard not a little, seeing that it is hard for a man to give up what he has held for many years. Then I heard the rest of the story, of my father's sudden death, of how the coming of the gold had saved Lily from being forced into marriage with my brother Geoffrey, who afterwards had taken to evil courses which ended in his decease at the age of 31. Of the end of Squire Bozard, Lily's father and my old enemy, from an apoplexy which took him in a sudden fit of anger. After this, it seemed, her brother being married to my sister Mary, Lily had moved down to the lodge, having paid off the charges that my brother Geoffrey had heaped upon his heritage, and bought out my sister's rights to it. And here at the lodge she had lived ever since, a sad and lonely woman, and yet not altogether an unhappy one, for she gave much of her time to good works. Indeed, she told me that had it not been for the wide lands and moneys which she must manage as my heiress, she would have betaken herself to her sisterhood, there to wear her life away in peace, since I being lost to her, and indeed dead, as she was assured, for the news of the wreck of the Carrack found its way to Ditchingham, she no longer thought of marriage, though more than one gentleman of condition had sought her hand. This, with some minor matters, such as the birth and death of children, and the story of the great storm and flood that smote Bungay, and indeed the length of the Vale of the Waveney in those days, was all the tale that they had to tell, who had grown from youth to middle age in quiet. For the crowning and the end of kings and of matters politic, such as the downfall of the power of the Pope of Rome and the sacking of the religious houses which was still in progress, I make no mention here. But now they called for mine, and I began it at the beginning, and it was strange to see their faces as they listened. All night long, till the thrushes sang down the nightingales, and the dawn shone in the east, I sat at Lily's side telling them my story, and then it was not finished. So we slept in their chambers that had been made ready for us, and on the morrow I took it up again, showing them the sword that had belonged to Bernal Diaz, the great necklace of emeralds which Guatemoc had given to me, and certain scars and wounds in witness of its truth. Never did I see folk so much amazed, and when I came to speak of the last sacrifice of the woman of Otomy, and of the horrid end of de Garcia, who died fighting with his own shadow, or rather with the shadows of his own wickedness, they cried aloud with fear, as they wept when I told of the deaths of Isabella de Siguenza and of Guatemoc, and of the loss of my sons. But I did not tell all the story to this company, for some of it was for Lily's ear alone, and to her I spoke of my dealings with Otomy, as a man might speak to a man, for I felt that if I kept anything back now there would never be complete faith between us. Therefore I set out all my doubts and troublings, nor did I hide that I had learned to love Otomy, and that her beauty and sweetness had drawn me from the first moment when I saw her in the court of Montezuma, or that which had passed between us on the stone of sacrifice. When I had done, Lily thanked me for my honesty, and said it seemed that in such matters men differed from women, seeing that she had never felt the need to be delivered from the temptation of strange loves. Still, we were as God and nature had made us, and therefore had little right to reproach each other, or even to set that down as virtue which was but lack of leaning. Moreover, this Otomy, her sin of heathenism notwithstanding, had been a great-hearted woman, and one who might well dazzle the wandering eyes of man, daring more for her love's sake than ever she, Lily, could have dared. And to end with, it was clear that at last I must choose between wedding her and a speedy death, and having sworn so great an oath to her, I should have been perjured indeed if I had left her when dangers were gone by. Therefore she, Lily, was minded to let all this matter rest, nor should she be jealous if I still thought of this dead wife of mine with tenderness. Then she spoke most sweetly, looking at me the while with her clear and earnest eyes, that I ever fancied must be such as adorn the shining faces of angels. Ay, and those same eyes of hers were filled with tears when I told her my bitter grief over the death of my firstborn and of my other bereavements. For it was not till some years afterwards, when she had abandoned further hope of children, that Lily grew jealous of those dead sons of mine, and of my ever-present love for them. Now the tidings of my return and of my strange adventures among the nations of the Indies were noised abroad far and wide, and people came from miles around, aye, even from Norwich and Yarmouth, to see me, and I was pressed to tell my tale till I grew weary of it. Also a service of thanksgivings for my safe deliverance from my many dangers by land and sea was held in the church of St. Mary's, here in Ditchingham, which service was no longer celebrated after the rites of the Romish faith, for while I had sojourned afar, the saints were fallen like the Aztecs' gods. The yoke of Rome had been broken from off the neck of England, and though all do not think with me, I for one rejoiced at it heartily, who had seen enough of priestcraft and its cruelties. When that ceremony was over and all the people had gone to their homes, I came back again to the empty church from the hall, where I abode a while as the guest of my sister and her husband, till Lily and I were wed. And there, in the quiet light of the June evening, I knelt in the chancel upon the rushes that strewed the grave for my father and my mother, and sent my spirit up towards them in the place of their eternal rest, and to the God who guards them. A great calm came upon me as I knelt thus, and I felt how mad had been that oath of mine that as a lad I had sworn to be avenged upon de Garcia, and I saw how as a tree from a seed all my sorrows had grown from it. But even then I could not do other than hate de Garcia. No, nor can I to this hour. And after all it was natural that I should desire vengeance on the murder of my mother, though the wreaking of it had been left in another hand. Without the little chancel door I met Lily, who was lingering there, knowing me to be within, and we spoke together. "Lily," I said, "I would ask you something. After all that has been, will you still take me for your husband, unworthy as I am?" "I promised to do so many years ago, Thomas," she answered, speaking very low and blushing like the wild rose that bloomed upon the grave beside her, "and I never changed my mind. Indeed, for many years I have looked upon you as my husband, though I thought you were dead." "Perhaps it is more than I deserve," I said, "but if it is to be, say when it shall be, for youth has left us and we have little time to lose." "When you will, Thomas," she answered, placing her hand on mine. Within a week from that evening we were wed. And now my tale is done. God, who gave me so sad and troublous a youth and early manhood, has blessed me beyond measure in my middle age and eld. All these events of which I have written at such length were done with many a day ago. The hornbeam sapling that I set beneath these windows in the year when we were married is now a goodly tree of shade, and still I live to look on it. Here in this happy valley of the Waveney, save for my bitter memories and that longing for the dead which no time can so much as dull, year after year has rolled over my silvering hairs in perfect health and peace and rest, and year by year have I rejoiced more deeply in the true love of a wife such as few men have known. For it would seem as though the heartache and despair of youth had but sweetened that most noble nature till it grew well nigh divine. But one sorrow came to us, the death of our infant child, for it was fated that I should die childless. And in that sorrow, as I have told, Lily showed that she was still a woman. For the rest, no shadow lay between us. Hand in hand we passed down the hill of life, till at length in the fullness of her days my wife was taken from me. One Christmas night she lay down to sleep at my side, and in the morning she was dead. Oh, I grieved indeed and bitterly, but the sorrow was not as the sorrows of my youth had been, since age and use dull the edge of mortal griefs, and I knew and know that we are no long space apart. Very soon I shall join Lily where she is, and I do not fear that journey, for the dread of death has left me at length, as it departs from all who live long enough and strive to repent them of their sins, and I am well content to leave my safety at the gates and my heavenly comfort in the Almighty hand that saved me from the stone of sacrifice, and has guided me through so many perils upon this troubled earth. And now to God my Father, who holds me, Thomas Wingfield, and all I have loved and love in his holy keeping, be thanks and glory and praise. Amen. End of chapter 40. Recording by Patrick 79. End of Montezuma's Daughter by H. Rider Haggard.